Here we go. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so we are just about to begin here. Okay, so thank you everybody for coming in here. It is now 11 o'clock Pacific Standard Time, 2 p.m. Eastern, and we have a great presentation for you right now. Frank, who is one of the main people there at Sqf, is going to be talking about small suppliers and the Sqf code that fits. If you want, at any point in time, you may go in the chat box and ask a question, and we're going to have this kind of be a dialogue. So as it's going, if you have any questions whatsoever, please just type in the message box, and we will be able, I'll ask Frank the question as he's going. That way we kind of keep the questions a little timely. And then at the end, there'll be some more Q&A as well. So if you have any questions that don't get asked, we'll be asking them towards the end. All right, so Frank, why don't you start, and why don't you just introduce yourself and kind of go over a little bit of what we're going to be talking about today.
Sure, for sure. Thanks, Matt. Appreciate that. Yeah, so for those in the audience that don't know me, my name is Frank Schreurs. I am a regional representative and technical member of the technical team at Sqf. Consumes most of my time. I also do some contract consulting and training, but primarily here working with Sqf, and have been doing that for a number of years now. Prior to that, been in the food industry for over 30 years primarily as an auditor, as a trainer, and running a certification body for a number of years too. So have an in-depth knowledge of various different types of food safety systems and requirements for different sizes of suppliers and the customer base and the food and supply chain and what they're asking for in the marketplace. So look forward to presenting today to you on a new program that we have at Sqf called our Fundamentals program. It was there prior to that, but we have recently relaunched it. And made it a little more palatable and more agreeable to the various types of programs that are being done internationally. And it is geared towards the small supplier, less developed organizations as a starting point for getting into and putting in a food safety management system. So we're going to be looking at different ways of why you need to do that, or why you might looking to put a food safety system in. Then some of the main buckets of a food safety system, not all of them, but the main ones, especially as they relate to getting started. And then a really quick 7 steps to implementing, or how to implement a food safety system at your place of location, your location. And then a little bit about how that fits into the fundamentals code, and a little bit about that, and all the way through that, some access for you to get to some tip sheets and some other resources that are on our website, all free of charge, that I think would be very helpful. And then obviously talking about some training opportunities for you to learn more about that. Okay, so as Matt said, if you've got a question as I'm going through there, just put it into the chat room. Matt will be looking at those, and will let me know when there's a question, and we'll answer that. That way, I'll also have some time probably at the end for anything that might pop up during the presentation that you want to ask, and you can do it at that time too. So I'm going to get going. Okay, so why do you need a food safety program? Well, we need to control risks, food safety risks throughout the supply chain. So I'm not sure, everybody's different in terms of where they are in the supply chain. Some of you might be closer to the primary production end, maybe receiving some produce and doing some minimal processing on that, or packing houses and repacking, or you might be further up in the chain, doing more complicated types of food preparation for maybe the food service or as an ingredient into the food chain, wherever it might be. So at every step in the supply chain, there's risks, and a food safety system is all about what risks you have that you can control, and how you do that. So how you recognize it, how you do that. When that doesn't happen, when that doesn't occur, either at the right time or in a timely manner, in the right way, we can lead to recalls. I'm not sure if you've seen some of the recent recall in McDonald's and the salad stuff. So that was the supplier into a food service type of an operation. So it happens all the time, and that and a lot of those are recalls or foodborne illnesses in the marketplace that have a substantial impact on the population. In the U.S., on an annual basis, the Center for Disease Control says that 1 in 6 people have some sort of foodborne illness annually, and that in the United States there are 3,000 deaths annually that are due to foodborne illness. Globally, that goes to 1 in 10 and 420,000 annually. So it's even in our day and age, when you think that the food safety systems and the food we get is safe, and it's relatively safe, not in all parts of the world, but it's changing, and the supply chain is changing. It's getting more complicated. There's more steps in that supply chain, and every time we add complication and steps, we add risk. And so for yourself, knowing what that risk is very important. It's important to your company that you work for. If it's your own company, it's your company brand and your business is at risk. If something happens, it might not be able to survive that. And if you're selling into a customer, that their brand is at risk, which is why a lot of customers are very demanding around food safety systems and certification, because they want to do whatever they can to protect their brand from the ingredients they might buy or the products they might buy from various parts of the supply chain. So lots of reasons to have a food safety system, but sometimes getting your head around what do I need, where am I in that process. Some of you may have had audits, some of you may not have had them. Third-party audits have been different than regulatory audits, regulatory inspections, if you've been privy to those. But whether it's a regulatory inspection or a third-party audit, they are looking for the same things. They're looking for what you can do to both identify what the food safety risks might be in your product or your process, and recognizing them and controlling them is of paramount importance. So what do we do? So let's take a look at preventing food safety risks, and we can look at it obviously from the common causes of that, but just the top areas that have a big impact to that are food safety plans, approved suppliers, personal hygiene of employees and visitors, temperature control if it's applicable to your operation, and sanitation. So we're going to toggle through those particular items. Just to give you a sense of if you're not familiar with some of these things, and they're fairly common to most food safety systems, regardless of how they might be constructed, or they're present in all regulations and most regulatory authorities that might have oversight over your operation, and they all have a piece to looking at what the hazards are and how to control them. So let's walk through those. So when you look at a global basis, so whether that's either within the U.S. Or North America or beyond that, the most common causes of foodborne illness, and foodborne illness is more bacterial in nature than other types of food safety risks, like either chemical or physical, but where they might occur most commonly either is in the water source. That seems to be the indication of what that recent recall McDonald's salads was due to some contaminated water. But we see a lot of recalls and foodborne illness in ingredients that are going into various parts of the supply chain and or the raw materials that are being supplied there. They can also be caused by cross-contamination between contaminated and uncontaminated products, either through unwashed hands or surfaces, food contact surfaces. And then we also have the issue with improperly cooked or held product, and that's the temperature abuse that I'll be talking about later. So all those types of causes or issues or activities relate to foodborne illness. So those are types of things that, as you're looking at your process, you can determine where those risks are and the things that you can. And there are things for all of these that we can do to control that risk. So food safety plans, you may have heard the term HACCP, which stands for Hazard Analysis and Critical Control Points, but they're basically our food safety plans. Are intended to look at your process or production flows and look at all the activities that go into making your product. Anytime there is a combination of people, materials, and equipment, there is risks. In some processes, that risk is very little, depending on the type of product it is. In others, it's can be more severe, and more controls have to be in place. So the first thing that basically looking for in the food safety plan is that you have a food safety team. This is usually, and this can be in a small place that can be 1 or 2 people, 3 or 4 people. Larger facilities can have up to 7, 8, or 9 people. Usually a cross section of people that know the process, know the various controls and activities that you can do to do that. So you have input from a number of people, so that the assessment of risk is as full or as complete as you need to be. So food safety team is definitely a must for having a good food safety plan. Once that team's in place, then you go through that risk assessment of your process and production flows, where you are identifying hazards that need to be controlled. So that's what HACCP is. It's hazard analysis, which is your risk assessment. And then you're looking at your critical control points, which are those points in your process that need to be controlled because of the risk of food safety. A lot of temperature controls are like that. Cooking steps, metal detectors for physical contamination or X-ray if you have them. Most other hazards that 95% of your hazards that you might identify are controlled through just good practice, employee practices. We call them in the manufacturing or process sectors, we call them good manufacturing practices or GMPs. You may have heard that term before. So identifying them that need to be controlled is important. Once you identify them, then you can control them through a clear monitoring process and corrective action process. And this is where the management of a critical control point comes into place. And this is all based on globally accepted good practices, where you establish who's doing what, how they're dealing with say a temperature monitoring step. And then if something goes wrong, if your measurement is beyond a certain value or below a certain value, depending on what you're measuring, then you have very clear and defined corrective actions that you would go through when those things go wrong. So that's what regulators, auditors, customers are looking for. They're looking for you to have a food safety plan. They want to know that you know what your processes and production flows are, where those hazards are, and which ones are significant in nature, and you control them. So there's many different services, training services out there that can teach on HACCP. There's online stuff. You can Google a lot of that. So really encourage you to look at that HACCP approach. It's typically a 12-step process that's very systematic in its nature, so that you can do it at start of a food safety management system that you're introducing, and something that you would do at least every year, or when there's changes to your product, because every time you have either introduced a new product or a new ingredient, you want to look at those risks and hazards and controls the same way as if you were starting from scratch. So a food safety plan, important piece to have in any food safety management system, small or large. Regulators and third-party auditors are looking for that.
Quick question.
So, yes.
There was a question about about the food safety team. So some of these, some small companies are looking to create an SQF program, might not actually have a whole might not have a food safety person, somebody who has a degree in microbiology or anything like that. What would you suggest in terms of putting together a food safety team when you're maybe a really small facility and you don't have the resources to go out and hire somebody specifically for food safety? What are some of the successes you've seen in putting that team together?
Well, the SQF code, the full code, does require you to have a practitioner in place, and the practitioner has to know the code and implement the code. Now, it doesn't stop you from using other people at your disposal. I mean, other people within even a small place has other operational people, which could be part of your team. But you can use an external source. You can use an external consultant that may have that technical and scientific background that would be needed to ensure that the analysis is clear.
Or just somebody who knows, is pretty detailed in their organizational skills, and you just send them to an SQF practitioner. They may not have the degree in biology, but they could learn the processes towards putting this together, right?
The only training requirement that a practitioner has to have is they do have to have HACCP training. But you don't have to have a scientific degree to do HACCP training. If your process is pretty simple. If it's a complicated process, obviously there's a lot of science behind there anywhere. I would suspect that they have somebody on staff or somebody around that knows the science behind them, or you wouldn't be able to make the products and get them out the door probably clearly. But for simpler operations, that's definitely the case where you wouldn't have that degree in that science. But there are ways that you can learn that. There are ways to get other resources to help you through that. And even if it's organizing software that can help on the organizational front, although it doesn't have to be that complicated, it can be very simple. Excel can do a lot of stuff. The software that's available and the tools that are available now are definitely a help to managing the food safety plans.
I agree. There are so many awesome tools, but I just know that a lot of our clients get held up with, well, I don't have a dedicated food safety person that's doing this, and it's going to cost me so much money. I have to spend so much money on a consultant, and I always say to them, no, the operations manager could be the SQF practitioner, as long as we go through the right processes and they're willing to do that extra work in order to maintain the food safety program. But I do like how you guys have spelled out exactly what it takes to be an SQF practitioner. And that could be something too, if you guys are interested in that, I can send you an email on exactly what it takes to be an SQF practitioner. But I just wanted to talk about that because I get that question all the time about food safety team, and some people try to overthink it, and it doesn't have to be.
Yes, I would agree. Yeah, it doesn't have to be that complicated. Okay.
Yeah. So one person said on the HACCP training that's required, does it have to be a basic or advanced type of HACCP?
The SQF code and because it's benchmarked to the Global Food Safety Initiative, I got a slide on that later on. Stipulates that a HACCP course should be 2 days in length. And some of them you can do some of these online, but most courses, person-to-person courses, are 2 days in length as the minimum. And they should be done by a training center that is, recognized by industry. You don't want to go take a HACCP course from, Frank's training company, unless Frank's training company has been used by others. So we have, and it's on our website too, SQF website. We have licensed training centers that train on the SQF program, but I know a large portion of them also do HACCP training. So I encourage any of the participants in this webinar to visit. And I've got a training slide later on that has some links to some training that would be helpful in that area.
Great. All right, we'll let you go forward. Yep.
Okay. So the other piece that because I mentioned earlier about the cause of foodborne illness, was it from ingredients or raw materials that you're getting into your facility. So Again, if you're in the just up from the primary production, you might be getting a large amount of product from the farm or from other parts of things. So some sort of an approved supplier or a program that looks at your suppliers. So it's identifying, the necessary and approved suppliers to your site. I would suggest creating a register. Hey, this is who we buy from, and have some sort of a process of how you determine who to buy from prior to buying it. So you're not just, buying from anybody. So it's like, not buying that seafood from somebody who's driving around your neighborhood in a pickup truck with a freezer in the back. And you're not quite sure where that's coming from. So there's a lot of risk in that. Do you want to take that risk on personally? You can do that, but when you're making a product that's going in the supply chain, you probably shouldn't be taking that risk on. So knowing who those suppliers are is critical. Identifying the risks with those ingredients purchased. So similar to your product and process flow in your food safety plan, part of that would be looking at your ingredients and looking at the risks that you get as a result of those. So some sort of a risk assessment of those ingredients. Selecting suppliers using various risk-based tools. So it could be as simple as low, medium, high. So you assess your suppliers and the ingredients on those. So anything that's a high-risk ingredient, you might have some more checks and balances in for those suppliers. Maybe you want to go visit them, or you require them to send in some sort of a certificate every time you get something from them. So you can do and monitor your suppliers differently using different risk-based tools. So you don't have to do the same thing for all of them. I think that's a waste of time sometimes. And by making it risk-based, you can put your attentions to those suppliers and ingredients that require that sort of oversight. Another part of your program for suppliers should be, an emergency plan. So, okay, I have all these approved suppliers. What if I can't get it from them? Or, our production goes up and we need more of an ingredient, we don't have them. So, where would you go to augment the volume that you would need of those suppliers in case of emergency? So some sort of defined plan to do that, just so that, again, if you have to do it, at least let's do it right in that way. So that also reduces risk. And then part of the same part of the program is some sort of annual review of all of your suppliers. How are they doing? So as the year goes on, it's not uncommon for, if you have problems with your supplier, keep a record of that, so you can basically have some sort of a scorecard that you can determine, hey, this supplier is doing a great job. This one, hey, we've had a lot of problems. And these problems don't just have to be food safety related. They can be quality related as well, because that all tells you a little bit about how good your supplier is at providing you with the types of materials that you need to make a consistent product. So approved supplier programs and controlling the risk there is an important part of a food safety system. The new regulation in the U.S., the Food Safety Modernization Act, and specifically the Preventive Controls for Human Foods regulation, has a big piece in their suppliers. It wasn't there before in previous forms of regulation. And it's there because we see a lot of the recalls in the marketplace not because of the product necessarily, the company that's making the product, but the suppliers into that company. Last year at Sqf certified facilities, almost 30% of the recalls at sites that were certified were due to the suppliers to those sites, not the suppliers themselves. So as a result, we have increased the requirements in the approved supplier program in Sqf to enhance sites' abilities to manage that risk. And we'll be looking for a reduction in recalls in the marketplace as a result of that. So your approved suppliers, something that you definitely want to have in your food safety system. Personal hygiene of employees is always part of any food safety system, and it is part of Sqf as well. It's part of the Preventive Controls for Human Foods regulation. Basically, five areas of concentration when it comes to personal hygiene for staff and visitors as well. There's the whole medical screening, infectious disease, and bodily fluids. Basically, that's a health status. So prior to hiring somebody, or even when somebody's been off sick for a long period of time, it's not uncommon to say that because they're working in a food-related business, that they should have some sort of a doctor's certificate or a medical screening or something to say that they're fit for use. It's up to you as a site to determine how specific you want that to be, whether you want to see the doctor stuff. I know there's cost and a whole bunch of other things involved there, but we definitely don't want people coming to work back if they have some sort of a disease that might be passed on to food. Similarly, if they are employed presently and they're ill, you don't want them coming to work if they're ill, if they can pass it on to both other staff members, but also the food itself. If there's cuts or wounds at work that happens, how do you bandage that? Again, we don't want bodily fluids that are getting onto packaging material or into the products. So having an idea of how you would deal with that would be important to your food safety program. Personal cleanliness is always in there, so that's very specific training and physical locations for hand washing. Usually there's 4 or 5 very specific activities that you must wash your hands after. So that's obviously going to the bathroom, it's handling different equipment and then handling product, it's eating lunch or anything else, and then washing your hands. And then very specific requirements for the wash stations themselves. Not all standards say that they have to be hands-free, but that's ideal. Soap and water, right temperature, someplace to throw a receptacle to throw the garbage, the towels, the waste towels in, those sorts of things. So those are all, pieces of the personal hygiene program. Personnel behaviors in there: smoking, eating, chewing, drinking are not permitted. Water is permitted in most instances. Obviously, that's a health and safety requirement. But again, you want to control where that could occur, and you don't want people bringing in their own water bottles because you don't know where they've been. So you want to control how that might be. Now, some customers and some standards have gone beyond smoking, eating, chewing, and have very specific things around jewelry and false fingernails, eyelashes, a whole bunch of other types of personal behavior and what you can wear and what you can't wear. That includes clothing as well. And then the final piece of that piece is visitors, control of who can come and go. If you're familiar with some of the work done in food safety systems at the farm level, you see a lot of that in biocontrol and control of visitors onto farms. Well, no different in a manufacturing or a process site as well, where you want to know who's coming and going, and that's got a food defense type of theme to it as well. And as well as where they go. All visitors should be, if they've not have been trained in your GMPs and your personal hygiene, should be escorted at all times by somebody on the staff. So personal hygiene, definitely a piece of your food safety system. Like I mentioned before, temperature control, if it's applicable, is something that is important in preventing foodborne illness and food safety risks from occurring. So this is cooking food. If you have to cook it, you're cooking it to regulatory mandated temperatures, and it's an internal temperature, and using a calibrated thermometer. You don't leave cooked food at ambient temperatures. It's a lot of very similar stuff that you would do in, types of controls you would have in your own kitchen. You promptly refrigerate unused cooked food or keep it very hot, so it's a hot hold stuff. So you might be in that type of a process where you have that. In refrigeration or freezing of perishable food items. So if you have a perishable type of ingredient that's coming in, fruit and vegetables, typically you're keeping cold more for quality reasons than food safety, but still you want to control the temperature and have good monitoring of what those temperatures are in your freezers or in your refrigerated rooms. So in processing types of environment, that's an important piece. So temperature control, you can definitely see that there. If you have to take something out of a refrigerator, you don't want to leave it on the floor for extended periods of time, either whether it's coming out of storage to be shipped or whether it's coming out of storage to be used in the plant. So a whole area of temperature control. And then this is what you would look at when you're at your food safety plan. So any step in that process where you feel that temperature abuse could occur, you would want some very specific procedures, tasks that employees would do to minimize the risk of that temperature abuse from occurring. So temperature control is something that would be weaved into a lot of your food safety program. Then sanitation is always a major piece. So like similar to your kitchen again at home, I always like using the analogy of your kitchen. You want to keep it clean so that there's not any cross contamination of that. Now sanitation can come in 2 steps. There's the daily housekeeping that you would do within your work areas, your storage areas, and the surrounding environment with basically everything is in its proper place and everything. There is a designation for a proper place and everything is in its proper place. So you don't have a lot of misuse of utilities or brooms. You don't want to be using a device or a utensil that you would use to clean a food contact surface and use it to clean the floor. So a lot of times you see some color coding and different things around a food plant that would with devices that are used for housekeeping. But keeping those things in control. But the housekeeping goes, it's not just the production area, but it's also those other support areas, such as, engineering shops or machine shops. I've been an auditor for a long time, and some of the best plants I've been through I can tell because the machine shop or the maintenance room is the cleanest part of the plant. And that usually tells me a lot about the pride that people take in keeping their areas clean. Other support areas would include lunchrooms, locker rooms, toilet and hand wash areas as well. So you have this whole housekeeping element of sanitation, but sanitation in its formal sense is cleaning. So you're using a cleaning product and then possibly a sanitizing product on food contact surfaces to ensure that you've gotten rid of any debris, protein, anything that might cause cross-contamination or an opportunity for microorganisms to grow. So a good cleaning program is a master list of all areas of the plant and all equipment, so that people know that you know what needs to be cleaned. So that master list includes what those areas and equipment are. It would also include the frequency with which you would clean it. It could be anywhere from daily up to an annual cleaning. Any piece of equipment or area of the plant must, that you point to or that you look at should be on that list. Now, for each of those areas or equipment, you would have a cleaning instruction. We call them SSOPs, which stands for Sanitation Standard Operating Procedure. And that can be a very simple four lists. You fill the bucket with this, you use a mop, you clean this, you throw it away. It can be very simple and very, very complicated, depending on the type of equipment. So some equipment that needs to be disassembled and assembled can be very complicated. You have clean in place systems that, even though you might just push a button, you still need to ensure that whole clean in place cycle has been completed. So a lot of cleaning instructions are required. And that ensures that when you're doing the cleaning, that every time you do it consistently. Effectiveness verification is part of cleaning. So this is a pre-op of a cleaning type of an operation, so that somebody cleans it and somebody inspects it to make sure that it's ready to go. So it can be a visual inspection. Sometimes people are using ATP swabs, which is basically seeing if there's any protein left on them. Some are doing micro swabs and using that to do it. So all this is part of verification of cleaning effectiveness. And then part of any cleaning program is records, records that it took place, records that if you found something it wasn't clean, how you went about re-cleaning it, and obviously that includes the verification activities as part of cleaning as well. So a sanitation program, a key piece of a food safety system. So those are the main pieces of a food safety system. There are other ones. There's pest control. There's preventive maintenance. There's what else might be in there? There's recall and traceability in there. What am I missing? Those, so there's other pieces of it, but what the 6 that I just did, the 5 are some of the main pieces. Again, as Matt was saying, if you're new to implementing food safety, it can be very overwhelming when you look at some of these programs and how much you might need to do. So I'm a firm believer in taking off little chunks and doing a good job on those. So with that in mind, what we did at Sqf was realize that, for some small and even medium-sized operations that are being asked to put in a food safety system, either by their customer or by the regulator, that can be where to start can be a very daunting approach, as well as looking at a food safety code that's got 250 types of requirements on it, and looks like you need to, as Matt said, might have to hire a full-time staff. That might not be the case. So on the screen right now is kind of our family of codes that are relevant to manufacturing or primary production type of stuff. We tried to color code them to make them easier. So our main food safety codes, edition 8, you see that in the middle. Those are our GFSI benchmarks.
Hold on 1 second, Frank. We have one question. Should specific chemicals be mentioned in their SSOPs or SSOPs?
Yes, if they're important. I mean, if you use a general cleaning compound around most things, you can be general about that. But if you've got very specific chemicals, especially either the cleaning agent or the sanitizer, for use based on the type of equipment or the type of food that you're trying to get rid of, then yes, the concentration that you would have to use, the amount of time, if you're using a foaming type of cleaner, how long that stays on there, how much, the concentration of the sanitizer. Yes, all that information. And you can simplify that too by having just automated dosing units. A lot of times a lot of chemical supply places will do that. So you can take the guesswork out of mixing it up. So they just have to, fill a pail from this green colored nozzle, say, and it gets all the right concentration, so they don't have to do that. But if they do mix that, then they have to be trained on how to mix that, where to mix it. So chemical control and chemical usage is part of sanitation, and should be included in the SSOPs for sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Good question. So where was I? So our main food safety codes are what we call GFSI benchmarks. So and I've got a slide in a couple slides from now on GFSI, but suffice to say that those are the main codes that are out there. A lot of times major customers in the marketplace, like food service companies like McDonald's or Yum or Cisco or U.S. Food Service, they require their suppliers to be certified to a GFSI recognized standard. So all of our Sqf Edition 8 codes are benchmarked to that, so they would fill that requirement. But they are, because they're following GFSI, they are pretty intensive around those requirements, and can be if you're starting scratch or not doing it, can be a tough go. So what we've done is create this family of fundamentals program. Just I'll go through to the next slide. Basically, because it breaks out those fundamentals codes. So we have two sets of fundamentals, one for primary production and one for manufacturing. Obviously, the requirements in a manufacturing or a produce holding area, whatever, those are different than if you're growing standards. So our primary production standard fundamentals and our full standard are based on more fruit and vegetable growing, but we also do have standards there for livestock and grains and pulses, aquaculture, those sorts of things. Those requirements are definitely different than manufacturing. So in the manufacturing and our fundamentals, we have aligned them with the Global Food Safety Initiative's Global Markets Program, which has a basic level and an intermediate level. The levels are basically designed to, depending on what you're being asked for in the marketplace and where you might be, an opportunity to kind of do a stepwise approach to implementing a food safety program. So if you look at it this way, you can start with, you say, the basic fundamentals program. And the main difference between our basic fundamentals and our intermediate fundamentals is documentation. The basic is, here's our requirements, you're doing it, you've got activities to do that, you can see that, very minimal documentation required. There is some, but it's very minimal. Then you can move up into the intermediates, which is a much more documented system, not full-blown food safety code. GFSI doesn't have to have a full food safety plan, which can be, as we mentioned earlier, can be a complicated process. So the intent of that is, if again, you're small, you don't know where to start, you can start with the basic, put that in place, then you can build on that, get some experience with how you do that, how you document, move up intermediate, and then if you're required to move up into your food safety code for manufacturing. We also have a quality code. It's not GFSI benchmark, but it can be added on to a food safety code to give you a quality certification as well. So it's very much a stepwise process. It can simplify that daunting approach so that you can chunk it out in reasonable time frame. The time frame for implementing those, it varies tremendously based on how much you have done now versus how much you need to get in place, and also various contractual expectations that are being asked for you in the marketplace. So if your customer says, yeah, we'll buy from you, why don't you start with basic and intermediate fundamentals from Sqf or another scheme or whatever, but we require you to have a food safety code within a year. Some of them might be that. Some of them say, hey, you got to take 2 years. We don't stipulate a length of time on any of these. Any certification on any of these levels are annual. So you have to have an annual audit to maintain your certification, but you can get a certificate for any one of these levels. The length of time and the time you need to get up to the full food safety code will be very dependent on your market and what your customer is saying.
This is kind of like what global market is, right? You just kind of adopted the global market.
We aligned specifically with the global markets program. Yes,
that's exactly awesome. I hope other companies do that. Yeah, I don't think anybody else has done it. We do a lot of global market audits, and when we saw you come out with this, we're like, oh my gosh, that's genius. Too bad other standards haven't done that to make it more specific towards like a stair step towards certification instead of just global market.
Yeah, and the other advantage of putting under Sqf code is you can issue a certificate, and it's it's a certificate. It's expected to be done by a certification body like WQS that is accredited. So there's a system in place. So it adds to the integrity of the certificate to have it within the Sqf family of codes. Sure.
So cool, love it.
Yeah. And I'll talk about a couple other things that is advantageous to the certification body and the sites as well. So I mentioned GFSI before, and if you're not familiar with it, because again, your customer may be asking you and using that terminology or not, but basically it's an organization that benchmarks certification programs such as Sqf to a set of food safety requirements. It only benchmarks to food safety. It benchmarks across the whole supply chain, so that's why we can benchmark our primary codes, manufacturing codes. We also, in that first slide, we have a code for packaging suppliers and storage and distribution operations as well, which are different than a manufacturing operation. But they're all benchmarked to GFSI. So basically, they create this benchmarking requirements, and if you have certification programs like Sqf, you can apply and have that benchmarked, and that allows customers and buyers in the marketplace to only stipulate that, and then it's up to the sites to determine which certification program works best for them, as long as it's benchmarked by GFSI. A couple of years ago, they went beyond that, their normal food safety requirements, and they created, as I mentioned earlier, and Matt just alluded to, the Global Markets Program. They did the same. They did a global markets program for primary and for manufacturing. And basically, this was a self checklist. You could take the checklist. You can do your own audits and see how you do against that. You could give it to somebody like WQS. They could do that on your behalf. But it wasn't a certification program. It was just a checklist. It was meant to help developing global markets, small suppliers, to get a sense of how they're doing and basically follow that program. So we aligned our fundamentals program with that, but put it into kind of SQF speak and within the SQF code so that you can get a certificate with that, and certification bodies like WQS can certify towards that. So this is a very busy slide. I apologize. It's a little small, but I wanted to get it all on there. And basically, it's just telling you, where you might be in the supply chain, what's driving you to have a food safety program. So it's kind of an if-then type of analysis. So if you need a program that is approved for small and medium sites and meets the GFSI Global Markets Program, then basically you can use our fundamentals program, either basic or intermediate. If you need to have a program that is GFSI benchmark, then you have to go to one of our food safety codes. If you need something that includes quality, then you can add our quality code. But if, let's say, you don't have a bio requirement, but you want a program to measure your food safety fundamentals that is kind of HACCP based, not necessarily HACCP, then you can use the basic program. The fundamentals adds on to that, but so it has a program that measures your food safety program based on HACCP. It's not the same as HACCP based, so we basically have some sort of a food safety plan. Then intermediate, and then if you want to do the full food safety code, then that's your alternative too. So depending on where you're coming from, what's driving you to food safety, you have choice here. And I think that the benefit of the SQF family of codes is that it allows for that choice. You can pick the one that works the best for you. You can work with your certification body to pick the best one that meets your current circumstance and can and meet your marketplace demands. So there are 7 steps to certification, and we're going to walk through those now. These are 7 steps from our perspective. It just sort of chunks it a little bit more for you. So if you're planning to get to certification, this is a recommended stepping stone. It doesn't. You can skip them if you want, but definitely what we recommend. So the first one is to learn about the code, You're learning about the code right now. You're on this webinar, so it's part of your education. You can also go online. We have an online program. We also have training centers that are licensed towards that, and we have these tip sheets as well available on our website that chunks out various topics of that. And I'll give you some links to those websites at the end of this presentation. So hold on to that. So basically, find out about the code. What is it? What's the requirements? Those sorts of things. That's a self-learning thing. Step 2, we would encourage you, if you're going to certification, to register on our SQF database. You have to eventually anyways. What this allows you to do is basically, keep in touch with us. We can forward you information. If you've got questions on where to find some sort of stuff, you can go to our customer service team. Really intended that not to be difficult at all. We really want you to find the information you need and use it to your advantage. So there is an annual fee for registration for the fundamentals program. It's a flat fee of $150. Primary producers are less than that, $100, and then basically for our full code, depending on revenue, it goes up from there. But that's an annual requirement that basically pays to keep SQF going. So all sites do that, but then similarly for a fundamentals program. This is a different registration. It's not that it's separate from any contractual arrangement you would have with your certification body as well. The third step is find your relevant food sector category, because this is basically tells you which code you need, whether you need manufacturing or primary. That's pretty self-evident. But we have a full set of of different types of codes. Here's some examples. You've got jams that might be food sector category 18, and it tells you which modules if you're using the full code, obviously, we use the same module number in the fundamentals code as well. It's not to do that. So the sector code is important. There's a whole, every code has an index that has those sector categories. Let's say if you were a fruit and vegetable, minimally processed fruit and vegetable supplier, you'd be food sector category 14. It just tells a little bit about the type of process and the types of risk that you might have, and it helps the certification body to determine who to send to you. Step 4, building your food safety team. As we mentioned before, you need that practitioner. You want other members of your, from either maintenance, purchasing, production, sanitation. Sometimes some people wear multiple hats. That's fine too. But definitely need to have, I would encourage you to have a food safety team to do the best job possible in that regard. Step 5, implementing and documenting your code. Every code, including the fundamentals codes, have 2 parts. A part A, which is basically tells you how the code works, how to get certified, all those sorts of things. And part B is split into what we call system elements. There's a list of those there, and regular GMPs. So I talked about a bunch of GMPs, but there's number 3 there is personal hygiene and welfare. So it's exactly what we talked about in personal hygiene. Under construction, premises, and equipment, we also have sanitations underneath there. We had over here on the system elements side, we talk about product traceability, the food safety system. Number 4 there on the left is your food safety plan. So basically that tells you what all the requirements are, and each code has that listed very clearly. So you have to basically implement it and document it where it says documented. Step 6, we said select a certification body. We have over 30 licensed certification bodies all around the world. Obviously, you're on this webinar because you're tied in, or at least you're working with possibly with WQS. So we encourage you to talk to them about certification on any of those codes, which they are licensed to provide to you. And then step 7 would be conduct what we call a pre-assessment. So before you get certified, you want to ensure that you've got everything in place. So you can you can do it. Actually, the WQS or your CB can do that pre-assessment or pre-certification audit if you want. Obviously, you have to pay them for that, but you can do it yourself as well. On our website, we have Excel checklist from the code, so you can just download that and use that as a guide to seeing where you are with meeting the code. So they're very handy for both your pre-assessment as well as your ongoing internal audit, which is a part of most codes as well. So a nice tool to have that, again, you can get on our website. So basically, once you get the pre-assessment, you're ready for the audit. And you get your certification. An audit is a very systematic process. There's always an opening meeting, walking through the sites. They're talking with employees. They're looking at documents and records. They're looking at the process. And as they're doing that, they're evaluating how well you've maintained or implemented the code. And if you haven't, because of either misinterpretation or your application is wrong, they'll make note of that, and they'll talk to you on a closing meeting about those non-conformances. They'll leave you a list of those. According to the Sqf code, in 10 days, you'll get a draft of that report, and usually within 30 days, you're required to close those before you can get a certificate. So all that stuff is explained in the code in that part A of any of the codes, so that both you understand that, and obviously the CB needs to understand that too, so that at the end you can basically be proud and get a certificate. So there is a example of a certificate. This small print on the left, sorry, it's very small. That's an example of our food sector category codes. Because those category codes and products, they go right on your certificate, right? So the certificate of registration has your name on it. It has your address. It would have the type of what code you would specifically are certified to. There's an expiry date on that. Again, you have to do that every year. But this is, again, something that your customers, a lot of times in the supply chain, they're looking for that certificate. It's going to be, obviously, you're going to registered on our database, so it's going to be there for them to look as well. It's meant to be a very public thing. The report is not public. That is your information that the CB will give to them. You can share that report with anybody you want. The CB will is not allowed to do that unless you give them that permission to do so. But you should be proud of that certificate of registration for whatever code it is, and use it in the marketplace to promote yourself and let people know that you've got a food safety system in place and that it's certified. So there are a lot of resources, as I said. There's available training through either online through our online program or through our licensed training centers. We have our tip sheets available. There's a link there that I encourage you to go look at. I was referencing a lot of those in the presentation today, so it shouldn't be you. Another place to do is we have information days. They're basically one day available. There's the locations and times that, depending on where you live, I would encourage you to if you're looking for it's just a little bit more information, those are great places to go. Good presentations. A lot of our CBs and training centers are there talking about various topics. We usually get a certified site to come in and kind of tell their stories. So do that. We also have our full Sqf Conference, which is usually about 850 people that gather annually. Lots, again, for a couple of days, 2.5 days of great presentation. And it's a good personal development as well. So our website, sqfi.com, has lots of different tools and resources for you to use. So I encourage you to do that. And there's some contact information there, either by phone. We have during working hours, Eastern Time, we have 3 dedicated customer service reps, but you can also contact them via web email as well. So get almost. I've done my time here, but if you got other questions you want to type in, I'd be glad to ask those at this point in time. There's my contact info, both my email and my phone number. If you've got something more specifically you want to do that, feel free to do that, and I can answer questions that way as well.
And one thing I know about Frank is at one point in time, Frank and I were competitors, and I still was able to get a hold of him anytime I wanted to. So Frank used to work for Guelph, right?
The Guelph Food Technology Center was the certification body. Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah,
that's
and then it ended up being NSF, and at that point in time, I was with Azul, and we were asking you to upload stuff, and you are very, very good at answering people's emails and getting a hold of people. And so I wanted to make sure that people saw your information. If you have any questions, he is an amazing resource and is just really, I think one of your love languages is service or time, because you're right there when anybody needs you. So I totally believe that. Okay, and so it doesn't look like we have any more questions, but if you do have questions, here's Frank's email. You can call him, you can connect with him directly, or you can connect with me. You can also connect with Frank or I via LinkedIn. We are on there quite frequently. And also, we're going to have another webinar next week, the same exact time, where Frank is going to be talking about food safety culture within Sqf. And that will be a great one. That's going to this is the basics of stuff. And then the food safety culture one is beyond just the checklist. How do you make have a food safety culture within your organization, which I just think is absolutely beautiful. Anything else, Frank, before we close this session?
No. Do you make this available to them, or if they want to get a hold of me, I can. If they want a copy of this, I can send it along to.
Yeah, I just sent them. I got that question too. Thank you, Frank, for reminding me. Yeah, we actually tomorrow, within 24 hours, you will receive a link that will have the webinar for a rewatch, quote unquote, and then also Grant and I will be posting this on YouTube and providing the information to SQF, and SQF will also be posting it, or may possibly. Frank is talking about possibly posting this on YouTube. But regardless, if you go to the Train to Comply YouTube channel, you'll be able to see this probably by Monday of next week, and then we'll email everybody who registered for this webinar the link on it for YouTube as well.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Frank, and I look forward to talking to you again next week.
Okay. Look forward to it. Thanks very much,
Bye.
folks. Bye.